Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. My name is Kuldeep Singh and I'll be your host today presenting this particular webinar. It is a tight 45-minute scheduled webinar and we will go through with a couple of details related to Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. I welcome you all who are joining us through Zoom meeting or Facebook Live or other streaming media engines down there. So without further ado, let's get started with our today's webinar. To talk about that, we would be discussing about Microsoft Azure Logic Apps down the line. And having said that, we've got our agenda to cover. So in today's webinar, we would be discussing about a brief overview of Microsoft Azure Logic Apps, followed by the top level concepts, what we would be discussing as part of that. We do have a practical demonstration to talk about Azure Logic Apps, and on top of it, if time permits, or we may stretch the session a little bit for a couple of minutes to answer any kind of questions what we may have. So let's get started. When we talk about the Logic Apps down there, what exactly the Logic Apps are, that's what we are going to discuss as part of that over here. So when we talk about Logic Apps down there, it is a Microsoft native Azure cloud service. So of course it is an Azure cloud service for sure. We can use it for scheduling something, for automating something, for orchestrating something. And when I say something, what that really means is you can start working to schedule, automate, or orchestrate. But what exactly what we are talking about here? What we are talking about scheduling, what do we want to automate? What do we want to orchestrate? So any kind of task, any kind of business process, or any kind of workflow you would like to schedule, you would like to automate, you would like to orchestrate for any kind of your marketing process automation, your Salesforce automation, any kind of custom API integrations or third-party integrations achieving down there, you can start working with Microsoft Azure Logic Apps down there. Having said that, when we talk about some of the top level concepts, what we would be discussing as part of that over here, let's quickly talk about them one by one. When I talk about the top level concepts, I've got the connectors over here, which we would be discussing in detail in this particular session. I've got the connections down there related to Azure Logic Apps. I've got the triggers associated with that. I've also got the actions associated with Microsoft Logic Apps connectors. So these are the four, you can say, a top 10,000 level feet of overview of what majority of the areas we would be working around when we talk about Microsoft Azure Logic Apps down there. So let's talk about them one by one. When I talk about some of the top level concepts, we can see a quick image coming up over here, which I've inserted over the slides, talking about a Logic Apps getting created. It is talking about when a record is updated in Dynamics 365. So it is a service. It is a cloud service from Microsoft Dynamics 365. I'm doing some sort of XML transformation out there. I'm registering that into my data mart down there, another service over here. I'm applying a control for if else checking down there based on the condition. If the condition is true, I'm creating another record in Dynamics 365 and posting that message to Slack, a collaboration tool, a third-party service down there. On top of it, if it is false, I would like to execute a stored procedure, maybe SQL Server over Azure or SQL Server on premises using Data Gateway. And once though that gets completed, I would like to send an email. So as part of this Logic Apps Designer, you can see I've got a couple of services over here, and on top of it, all those services, we are pretty much calling them connectors down here, which we would be discussing down there. The Microsoft versus non-Microsoft based connectors, standard connectors, or premium connectors. And then to be able to authenticate with them, we've got the connections down here, and we will be discussing triggers and actions in the upcoming slides thereafter. So let's talk about connectors in Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. No need to say that, guys. You can collaborate the whole webinar. You can pretty much compare that with Microsoft Power Automate as well. So all these concepts are applicable in Microsoft Power Automate as well, which was formerly known as flows, but there are some basic differences between them. And today our focus is Logic Apps. So when we talk about connectors which are available in Logic Apps, so the Logic Apps needs to access some data. some services, maybe Microsoft or non-Microsoft services, and systems, cloud-based systems, on-prem systems, hybrid connectivity down there. So you can use pre-built Microsoft managed connectors down there that are designed to connect, access, and work with your data to fulfilling your third-party integration needs down there. Having said that, we've got our standard connectors, we've got our premium connectors down there as well. As the name suggests, pricing plays an important role along with the performance executions and the dedicated compute down there. I've got 394 connectors as on today while I'm presenting this webinar, and the number keeps on increasing day by day. So you can assume the huge number of services Logic App supports as far as the connectors are concerned. It is available to use. You can start using these connectors with Power Apps or Power Automate or Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. Today's focus is Azure Logic Apps down there. Of course, there are some Microsoft-based connectors and non-Microsoft connectors from third-party services. We will be discussing all of them in a bit in here. There are some connectors which are in preview as of now, and most of the connectors are already production ready. You can start using them right across in your environments down there. So when we talk about connectors, let's take an example. I've got some of the connectors down the line here. Some of the connectors belongs to Microsoft over here. I've got some of my third-party connectors, Azure Resources, Dynamics 365, Event Grid, Data Lake down there, Azure Blob, Amazon Redshift down there, and there are the premium connectors. There could be standard connectors as well. So the question comes up, where exactly do we see them? Where we can find all these connectors? So let me take you to my portal over here. I'm quickly going to open a new tab. Let me go on portal.azure.com. So that's the area where we can start working with our Azure Logic Apps down there. But instead of that particular one, we can start creating logic apps and all those values associated over here. At any given point of time, if I would like to go to Microsoft Logic Apps, let me click on the Logic Apps down here. Okay. I would like to add a new logic app. So let me click and open that logic apps blade over here. I will be showing you the connectors in multiple areas. Important thing, in which subscription I would be creating this logic app. So let me go ahead and select my subscription listing over here from A05. I've got a resource group available over here. Instead of this one, I rather would like to create a new one, and I would like to call it as Webinar Logic Apps. And this is what I would like to name it. It's going to be a new resource group in my subscription. What is going to be the name of the logic app? So let me call it GTL marketing automation, or whatever you would like to name it. So it's all up to us how we would like to automate that. So let me call it that GTL marketing automation. And this is what I would like to call it. For example, this is going to be the name of my logic app. I would like to have it deployed on a specific region down there. Most of my services are in East US, so let me select my location down there. Not using any log analytics or anything. At this point of time, I'm simply clicking on review, and once the final validation gets completed, all I'll be doing is I will be creating this particular logic app as part of my Azure demonstration. Of course, we would be discussing connectors and plenty of things. So the whole purpose why I provisioned this logic apps from the portal to show you where you can find your connectors. Number one, what type of connectors are available, how we can differentiate them between Microsoft versus non-Microsoft, premium or standard, and all those things. So you can see that I've got my deployment got succeeded down here. So if you click on go to resource, I'm pretty much on this logic app, and it opens me the logic apps designer. So once I'm on that Logic Apps Designer, this is the place where I can have plenty of templates, I can have plenty of connectors and lots of details down there. I can start working with all those things associated to that. I will come back to this particular area. At present, if I go to the Logic Apps, I can see one Logic App got created on this particular resource group which I selected as part of this subscription and the location. Let me open that Logic App down here. and it opens me the Logic Apps Designer where I can start working with a blank Logic app and multiple things. So if I click on a blank Logic app over here, there I can see plenty of connectors, more than 380, so to be precise 394 connectors as on today, depending on whatever you might want to do. For example, I'm looking something related to Azure connectors down there. It's searching up and giving me all Azure related services, Azure related connectors down here. You want to see some of the built-in connectors, some of the standard connectors down here related to Azure, some of the enterprise connectors related to Azure. We can have the custom connectors as well. For example, someone's looking for Amazon connectors, and let me have all as my filtered selected down here. So anything coming up from Amazon, I can see those connectors listed up in here. I'm looking for Salesforce, a third-party service over here. I can see all these connectors coming up across in here. I'm looking for social media down here, and when I talk about social media, it could be LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, multiple things down there. I can see those values kicking up right across in here. I want to see something related to Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. I can see all these connectors coming up across in here. Important thing to notice, if you would like to discuss about all these details and work up along with that, let me click on the list of connectors. And you can see that that is giving you all the connectors which are available in here. We've got some built-in connectors, you can control flows. I've got multiple things over here. You can see Azure Queues, FTP, on-prem connectors down here, integration connectors, ISE connectors related to Azure. I can see plenty of details from here. So one way of seeing them, what you're seeing on this PowerPoint presentation is the list of connectors. We can access them anywhere, whether they are standard or premium, Microsoft or non-Microsoft. I can pretty much have them listed down there. All right, that is the very first component of what are connectors in Azure Logic Apps. Let's talk about the second major thing, which talks about connections over here. So it is really important once you have a connector, which is technically a service, a Microsoft versus a third-party service, how are we going to authenticate and authorize ourselves with that particular service? That is technically known as a connection in Logic Apps. So once you have your connector in place, you're going to create a connection. You're going to authenticate yourself against that. All right, let's talk about the third major thing down there, which talks about the triggers. So I would like to talk about that, guys. Whenever we talk about our Logic Apps Designer, creating Logic Apps into Azure, triggers are always going to be the first in place. That is technically talking about what will trigger that Logic Apps to run. Is it an HTTP based trigger? Is it something related to Microsoft Forms or any kind of connector? The trigger will always be the first thing. So many Microsoft as well as non-Microsoft connectors provide triggers that fires when something happens, when any event happens, or when a new data meets a specified condition down there. For example, you might want to getting an email, or you might want to detect some changes in your Azure storage account. So each time the trigger fires, the Logic App engine creates a new Logic App instance that runs that workflow and do the required jobs and actions down there. So a trigger will always be the starting point in your Logic Apps. Perfect. Let's go to the next segment over here, which talks about actions. This is fourth, I would say last but not the least in Power Apps or Logic Apps or any kind of automation engine down there. So actions are all the steps that happens after the trigger. So when a trigger fires, when the event occurs, what should happen thereafter? That's what we decide and that's what we provide in our actions down there. Each action usually maps to an operation that's defined by the connector down there, or you can have a custom connector, which we're not discussing in here as of today. So if I go about a brief summary before my practical demonstration today, we talked about connectors. Ideally, these are the services or third-party services managed by Microsoft as far as Azure Logic Apps connectors are concerned. Along with the connectors, I'm going to have my connections over here, technically the authenticated and authorized access, impersonated access, or direct access to those particular connectors. And my connectors may or may not have triggers and actions. So there are situations my connector can have the triggers and can also have actions, both. There may be a situation my connector do not have a trigger but does have an action. And there may be a situation my connector does have a trigger but do not have an action over here. So all three are quite possible when we talk about my connector can have triggers as well as actions, or either one of them. All right, so let's start working right across in here. The last thing we are discussing here is templates, which are available in Logic Apps. So when we talk about templates, these are low codes, or I would say no codes pretty much templates, where you need to specify only the parameters to get those orchestrations or workflows running. So there are connectors related to remote work, approval-based templates, data collection templates, Visio-based templates, email-based templates, events and calendars down here, mobile templates, notification templates, productivity templates, social media templates, synchronization templates. I've got all these templates available in my Logic Apps down there. Where do we see them? Let me take you down here, and when we were talking about the design, so when I'm clicking on the Logic app over here, once again, it takes me to the Logic Apps designer, and you can see I've got templates over here. For example, it says delete all the Azure blobs, or it is talking about HTTP request and response, or it is talking about save my email to SharePoint document library. So you can see I've got my email connector, I've got my SharePoint connector. You can talk about, come below and talk about when a member is added to a MailChimp list, ask me if I also want to add them to SharePoint list. So I've got 4 different connectors involved over here, and that's provided to you as a template, as a ready to use templates. So whenever we talk about these template categorizations, that's pretty much available right across over here, how we can start working. And that's pretty much all these categories we can start utilizing, whether it's I want to go for the general templates down there, I want to go for scheduling templates down there, I want to go for social media templates down there, and you can start working right across in there. All right, that's what we had as part of our templates mechanism in Azure Logic Apps. So 4 major concepts: connectors, connections, triggers, and actions. And on top of these 4, we have the pre-built templates available. So now we are about to do a quick demonstration over here where we would be creating a Logic Apps using the portal. I already did that. What I did was created a Logic Apps from the Azure portal by providing the subscription, the resource group, and the location down there. The second thing, what we are just about to do, editing the Logic Apps designer, and on that designer, we would be working with connectors, connections, triggers, and actions all together. So let's start working with that. So before I start working with that, let's have any small example. It could be any connectivity, any kind of application could be down there, and multiple things we can start achieving right across as part of that. So let's take an end-to-end example, this time maybe for marketing automation or anything. So for that, I would like to involve multiple services. So I would like to do a little bit of prerequisites down there, and then we would start working right across with that. So for this one, let's see what I'm going to do. I'm moving to forms.microsoft.com, which is altogether a Microsoft managed services for creating and working with forms. I'm creating a new form over here. And let's talk about, this is my Logic Apps demo, and I would like to call it my marketing automation, SMM postings, whatever I want to call it. We can have a description. Let me add some values over here. So I would like to add a text over here. Let's call it text with keywords, for example. or tags, whatever I want to call them. And it's going to be a long answer. I can pretty much start utilizing it. It would be a required field to the form. Nothing related to this webinar, but just a quick prerequisites down there. I'm going to have another value over here, which is going to be my image URL, for example. I'm going to have another value down there that is going to be my title associated with that. Okay. I'm going to have another demonstration over here, another value down there, and that would be my URL, talking about my content URL, whatever I would like to make it. So in a nutshell, I have a sample form available. Let me go to the settings, and I would like to make it available. Anybody who's having the link can respond to that particular form. So if I copy that particular link and open that recently created form, this is a Microsoft Forms which gives me all those fields, and I can start editing values over here. Well, that's fine. That's just one thing which I did. Now let's start working what I really want to do with Logic Apps, any kind of marketing automations or anything. So I can use any templates from here. For this demonstration, I would like to create everything from scratch. So I'm clicking on a blank Logic App. Okay, and it is talking about searching the connectors and triggers. To be able to work with that, I'm looking for Microsoft Forms. So for example, when I search over here, it will search all those values available, and one of the servers I can see is Microsoft Forms, which is available over here. Let me click on that connector. One thing, the very first thing, this is a connector. Okay, I've selected my connector. Now you can see that my connector is having the triggers. My connector is also having the actions over there. So there may be a possibility that a connector may only have a trigger or may only have an action, or both of them. So in this case, trigger would be my starting point. I would like to trigger this Logic app whenever a new form response is submitted. Okay, another couple of examples could be you got a Microsoft Azure grid, you would like to receive notifications from there, processing to event hubs, or you want to get notifications from your Azure machine learning algorithms for predictive analysis, or you might want to trigger an HTTP request to call a function app or something. Could be any connector down there. The moment I select my connector and trigger, it is asking me to sign in with those Microsoft Forms. So I'm talking about authentication and authorization. This is what I call connections. We will revisit that particular area. So let me click on sign in, and it will ask me to provide the login information. Since I'm already logged in, it should log me in and take me back to my list over here after the successful authentication happens over here. So let this one gets completed. It is redirecting me to the login area, asking me to log in with my corporate credentials. Let me just do that. Not necessarily it has to be the same account, could be any authenticated account down there. Okay, it is creating a connection. So important thing, before I do anything, let me click on that ellipsis icon. And you can see that I'm already connected with that. We'll discuss settings and multiple options thereafter. And currently I am connected to this particular authenticated user. So this is my connection which I just did. Okay, let me pick up a form from here. I've got plenty of forms available over here. The one I would like to utilize is Logic Apps Demo, the one which I just created, the marketing automation SMM posting. I just created and I started working with that. All right, so that's the first step I would like to work up. Then I'm gonna have a new step associated with that. All right, so the very first thing which it talks about, how can we start working with those particular examples? So I was talking about I can create a form, I can have a connection with that. Another one, somebody might be talking about, hey, that's great, I've got a business application service here. For example, I've got my Dynamics 365 up and running. And I would like to have some flows created, something created right from there. So I would like to connect my Dynamics 365 with my social media engine using Logic Apps and multiple things down there. So I can have different connectors for that. So to be able to show you, you can always change that connector at any given point of time if you want. If you don't want that form, just delete it. It's as easy as that, and start working with the connectors. So in this case, for example, I'm talking about common data services. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm talking about we can have plenty of connectors down there. Okay, so let me click on my common data service, which I'm selecting over here. And then it is talking about when a record is created, when a record is deleted, or when a record is updated. You can see all these values coming up right across in there. You would like to do something else. So let me go back over here, and you would like to connect your Salesforce, or you would like to connect a Dynamics connector instead of common data service. I would like to go with Dynamics 365. So when I click on my Dynamics 365, you can see in the bracket that says deprecated. So if it is a deprecated one, Microsoft recommends to not use it because it is going to be discontinued down there. So that's fine. I do have all these values available in here. I can start with any of those values to start working and having those data down there by creating those logic apps associated with them. So let's go over here, and I would like to go with any of those examples. So in my case, I was talking about the forms engine down there. So that was my Microsoft form. Let me select my Microsoft form over here. And I already have the connection, so it's utilizing the same. When a new response is submitted, I would like to do something. Okay, so it is asking me to pick up a form. I'm selecting my labs. So I'm talking about my logic apps, the demonstration which I just created. Okay, then it is asking me to add a new step. So when I click on new step, there you can create anything. You can have your controls, you can have conditions, you can have variables, you can have for each, loop, scopes, multiple things. So in our case, for example, I would like to call my Outlook 365 down there. All right, let me just have it. So I'm talking about Outlook 365. You want to have a Gmail for email sending and notifications. You might want to have any other connectors down there. So let me click on that Outlook 365 associated with that. And what I would like to do with this one, I've got the actions over here. So I would like to send an email. So when I'm selecting that, let me send an email which is version 2 with the options available. I can send an approval email as well. So it is asking me to sign in again. So this is a different connector, and we are talking about a new connection now. So let me sign in, and I'll be using my credentials over here itself, but it could be any account down there, talking about the authentication and authorization down here. So I've got two different connectors. I've got two different connections. Let me sign in myself. Could be with a different account altogether. If I would like to send a generic notification to the team about a new response got submitted, they need to approve or do something based on that. We can always start working by creating those logic app engines down there. So let's have this connection added over there. It would, and no need to say that, guys, for some sort of services, it may ask you your organization consent to be able to connect with those services. So in this case, I am successfully connected. To whom I would like to send this notification. So for example, I've got an information down there. I've got my support address down there. Let me utilize this particular email address. What is going to be the subject of that particular one? So you can see your dynamic content right from here. When a new response is submitted, you can have body, you can have the list, and you can get all those values associated. But at present, let's say I would like to say a new response submitted. And you can talk about, please check the values. Just for demonstration, I'm providing that particular one. What if I would like to get all these dynamic values from here? I can pretty much get the get response options from there in the middle and start working along with that. So let's take an example. If I'm again using Microsoft over here, Microsoft Forms, and I would like to see the response details. So my form, which was capturing those details, was logic apps. So let me select that one here. What is the response ID we are talking about? So the latest response, what we selected as part of that, I can pretty much have the list response notifications items, the response ID. I can get all those response values associated with that. And once you have all these values in between, now you can start seeing that all those dynamics values are keep on coming. So what actually happening, whenever a new response is submitted, which is a trigger, I'm having an action to get the details of those responses, and I can start working and sending, receiving emails based out on that. So for example, before I sent an email, I would like to invoke one more action. What I'm trying to show you here, I can add an action, I can add a parallel branch to run parallel operations down there. So let me add an action in the middle, and this time I'm invoking one more connector. That's going to be my LinkedIn. So when I talk about my LinkedIn connector, I can connect the values over there. So let's say I would like to share a company update, or in this case, would like to go for a personal article. I would like to write that article as part of that. So it is asking us to sign in. Let me sign in with the credentials over here. Once again, we are creating a new connection with this connector. So we are all circling with those four major values. One is my connector, the second one is my connections, the third one is the triggers, the fourth one is the actions. So that's all Microsoft Logic Apps all about. So let me go back in here and have that authentication gets completed. So I'm talking about that connection. It is signing me in as to my LinkedIn account, and you can see I've got the values in here. So first thing first, what is my content URL where it is going to redirect from that particular article? So whatever I specify on the form, I would like to use that dynamic value here. Would it be visible to guests or a private post? I would like to make it a public post. All right, you want to add some more parameters? I would like to go with the title as well. Okay, I would like to go with the description as well. I would like to go with the image as well. All right, so let me have those parameters on. These are the optional parameters here. So whatever title I specify on the form will be coming up over here. The description is going to be the text with the keywords. Okay, what is going to be the image URL? That is going to be my image URL right across. You want to add multiple parameters, all up to you. Maybe subject or text. I haven't created those fields, but for example, the subject in my case is going to be the title, what I'm creating, and the text is going to be the text with the keywords what I'm providing. So I'm utilizing those values again and again. Okay, so what it is going to do, when a response is submitted, it will be having that response details. It will share an article down here, and when I'm talking about sending an email to someone, a queue or someone, you can pretty much have all those values, all those dynamic values, whether it is related to LinkedIn, whether it is related to the response details, whether it's related to when the new forms is submitted, all these connectors, and have those values inserted down there. Well, at this point of time, let's say I would just like to go with this one and have something specified over there. Let's call it admin team. So this is my sample logic apps, which is having three different connectors with the connections, triggers, and actions all together. I can have if else, switch case, multiple services, HTTP triggers, timer triggers, all those things down here. At present, I would like to save it. The moment you are saving it, if it is telling you the save logic app completed, meaning you do not have any errors, any compilation errors, any logical syntextual errors down there. All right. Let me go to my logic apps down here. This was the logic app which I created actually, and you can see that I've got 3 different actions over here. You can see them right across in there. If you talk about and come down to the API connections, I've got a connection for LinkedIn, Microsoft Forms, Office 365. You want to talk about the code view, the XML view of that particular logic apps down there, the JSON view down here. You can see all these values. You can switch back to the designer down there. Let me go to the overview area here, guys, once, and it is time to test this particular logic app which we just created. So let's take an example. I've got multiple things over here, and one of them is, I would rather like to go with, all right, let's go over here. For example, I'm at GTechLearn and I would like to have some sort of social media postings from here. So I've got an upcoming webinar on Power Platform. Friday, October 23rd, for example. So this is the title I would like to make. So to make it specific down here. So this is going to be my title, Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement Power Platform. It is actually a webinar. I'm pretty much writing that particular over here. What is going to be the text with keywords? For example, let me copy that values from there, or you can type whatever you want. Let me copy that and have it pasted over here, followed by some of the keywords down there. Let me call webinars. Let me call D365 CE. Let me call Power Platform. So I'm talking about some of the tags which I'm specifying right across in here. Another value, let me go from here. I've got a couple of things listed. So I would like to have an image which I would be placing for that particular post. So let me go down, and I'm actually looking for this one. And there I do have an image URL associated with that. So let me just copy that and have it pasted over here. This is my image URL. What is going to be the content URL, meaning when someone clicks on that post or article, where people should be redirected. So in this case, they should be redirected to this login page. And let me just go out there and paste it as my content URL. And all I'm going to do now is I'm clicking on submit. Well, this is Microsoft Forms. That's it. The response was submitted. Everything looks cool. That's all. That's okay. Let's go back to our Azure logic apps over here, and I'm talking about the execution histories. So you can see the trigger histories over here, how many times that has been evaluated. You can see all these values, and you can see it got fired, and that was successful. So before I come back and analyze all those values, let's go and verify some of those details. So I'm talking about my LinkedIn profile because I used my own credentials down there. And let me see some of my articles or postings down there, the latest ones which I did, or instead of articles, let me go on my recent activity. So I should be seeing them right across over here. My post should be visible. Okay, great. There we are. Let's take a look. So this is the article, guys. It just posted just now in an automated way, which says all the values, the tags which we provided in our logic apps with the image, and on top of it, what if someone clicks on them? And if someone clicks over here, it is redirecting them to the sign up page for this particular event. A very small example of a social media integration, a kind of a automated LinkedIn postings or anything like that. There was another example. It was supposed to send an email as well. Now, let me show you something. So when we talk about that overview engine, let me quickly refresh this logic apps over here, the one which I just created, and you see that it is telling me succeeded. Well, let me click over here and let me show you how it went. So I'm seeing the execution detail of my logic app now. It is talking about when a new response is submitted. You can see the keys, all the JSON elements, the values associated with that. The status was 200. That's quite okay. Everything was cool. No problem on that particular area. The next one is it is getting those response details. So now it is getting the forms, the first response, and getting all those values right from there. It was submitted anonymously on this particular date and time. Perfect. Then it was supposed to share an article. It took 1 second down here. Visible to guest is true, and all these options which are coming up, which we were verifying, and it returned us into the output. And this is my update ID, the LinkedIn update ID. On top of it, it is sent an email to support. So the email is already out, status 200. People will be seeing that email on their inbox right across in there. So just want to tell you guys, this is how easy LinkedIn Logic Apps or Azure Logic Apps are. You can have n number of connectors, and believe me, it could be my HTTP trigger, Azure Event Grid. It could be my Hadoop Spark HD Insight cluster. It could be my Azure Synapse Analytics. I've got more than 390 connectors already available, and more than half of them are Microsoft native services, which we can start utilizing right across from there. So there are questions people say, so we know how do we create a logic app. We also know what is a logic app designer. We also know how do we design, add those connectors, triggers, actions along with connections to that. We know the execution histories and all that. And people say, hey, that's great. Do we have a chance if we want to create a custom connector? Can we do that? Well, absolutely yes. We can create custom connectors if the third-party services or legacy software is trying to integrate. If they're not available in here, we can always create custom connectors. That is something we are not discussing as part of this particular module down here. So that was one quick example which was talking about logic apps, and we can involve as many connectors and services as we want when we talk about working with these options down there. Taking you back to my PowerPoint presentation, this was talking about a very small demonstration here, what we did on Azure Logic Apps. So for all the future events, guys, you can keep us following on our events page. That's quite easy actually. All you need to do is visit our websites any point of time, go to the events area, and you will see all these events listed. You can subscribe to them at any given point of time. We are creating events at multiple time zones which will be available right across. And no need to say that, guys, it'll be a really great help for our faster pace of growth. You can start subscribing us or following us on all these social media channels, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. You can start following us, and please follow and subscribe so you do get the latest notifications out of that over there. So now let me quickly open the chat for every particular streaming engine and including Zoom invitees over here. So let's start having your questions, guys, your questions on the chat. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to answer possibly all of them given the time frame over here. Your questions on the chat. Okay, great. Question over here. Can we have the logic app created from the JSON code itself? The answer is absolutely yes. If you do have your JSON code ready, instead of designer dragging and dropping, just put up your JSON code and it will do the rest. The designer and the JSON code, the code behind, are in complete synchronizations. Can we have connectivity to Azure Synapse Analytics? Absolutely yes. You got a connector available and you can start working right across over there. Another question coming up, the Logic app, is it available to work on Azure Web Apps? So the answer is yes, we do have connectors available for Azure App Services, which install Azure Web Apps, which talks about API apps, which also talks about the function apps. You can start invoking those connectors and start working around with them. I've got another connector, another question over here, guys. What if we would like to connect our ERP systems down there, whether it is SAP or Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations? So we do have the Finance and Operations connectors available. You can start integrating them with the dual write engine or the common data service, one. Second, if it's an on-prem installations, you can install and configure the data gateways and get them connected through your OData services if you want. So that's quite possible. We can start working along with that. So that is completely supported. I've got another question. It looks like it is same as Power Automate. Is there really any difference? The answer is absolutely yes. The designer is different, the code behind, because in Power Automate, you barely see the designer as JSON. It's only available on Logic Apps, but behind the scene, both are referring to the same orchestrator engine. So pretty much the same thing. I would say 85 to 90% you will analyze both are exactly the same things when it comes to Power Automate and Azure Logic Apps. All right, perfect. So this is what we had for today's session, guys. Thank you very much for being the part of this particular webinar. It was really nice having you for such an audience down there. Keep following us, follow our social media channels, and register for the upcoming webinars. I'll see you later. Hope we would be able to answer a couple of more questions, but it was pretty much a tight scheduled 45 minutes webinar. So thank you very much once again. See you later. Enjoy the rest of the day and the evening. Bye bye.